and welcome to the Watchman. Well, 2015 is still very young, yet we've already seen a string of Islamic terrorist attacks here on Western soil. We've seen jihadists massacre people in Paris, in Copenhagen, Denmark. We've had a major terror cell broken up in Belgium, and we've had some ISIS-related terror arrests right here on U.S. soil. Now, most of the time when these attacks happen here in the West, the mainstream media says these are lone wolves, like they just kind of appeared out of nowhere to carry out attacks of carnage. Well, what if these are actually known wolves? That is the term coined by my friend Patrick Poole. He's a leading investigative journalist, an expert on jihad and radical Islam, and a regular columnist for pjmedia.com. Folks, this is eye-opening stuff. Take a look at my interview with investigative journalist Patrick Poole talking about the known wolves on law enforcement's radar screen that are in your backyard. Take a look. Well, Patrick Poole, welcome back, my friend. It's always great to have you here and get your insights, especially now. Look, we're coming out of the ashes of this horrific attack in Paris. We're seeing arrest after arrest, it seems, in Europe, in the United States. Now, a lot of people have dubbed this the lone wolf syndrome, lone wolf Islamic terrorists, but you've come up with a new term to identify them, known wolves. Talk about that a little bit. What is a known wolf when it comes to Islamic jihad?
Well, Eric, what we've seen in these terror incidents, going back to even the 9/11 attacks, is that time and time again, these terror attacks, whether it's in the United States, Canada, the Sydney guy in Australia last month, the Paris attacks, in all of these cases, these were individuals who were already known to law enforcement. And sufficient action wasn't taken against them to be able to prevent them from killing citizens. For instance, in the Sydney hostage situation, Sheikh Haran was out on bail on 2 separate charges. He had already been convicted of harassing the widows of soldiers, Australian soldiers who had been killed in combat in Afghanistan. You know, he was a well-known extremist figure in Australia, and he had even said previously that he was going to stage a protest in Martin Place, which was where this shop was, where he
exactly where he did it,
took the hostages
and killed 2 hostages. By the way.
And going back to the 2 incidents in Canada in October, 2 separate incidents within a week, you know, most notably the attack on Parliament Hill
in Ottawa, and in fact outside of Montreal as well.
And in both those cases, both of those individuals had already had their passports pulled by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police because of their known terrorist sympathies. And in those 2 cases, you had individuals dead, and you had a gunfight in the halls of Parliament in Canada. And so with the direct attack on free speech in Paris that we saw on Charlie Hebdo, and the fact that it was over several days, you know, it was a situation that continued throughout the week, so the news cycle was not able to bury the story. It was a direct attack on free speech. It continued for several days. I think it really captured a lot of people's attention, and these past incidents kind of have increased people's awareness of the degree of the problem, plus ISIS.
Yes. ISIS, I'd say, and the Paris attacks maybe are somewhat of a tipping point in that regard, Patrick. This is frustrating when I listen to you describe this. These are hardened Islamic terrorists who have killed people, who have American, European, Australian, Canadian blood on their hands, and they were on intelligence officials, law enforcement authorities' radar screens before they carried out these attacks. What you're saying basically is, look, these attacks possibly could have been prevented.
Absolutely.
So how is this happening? How are they're on the radar screen, and yet they're sliding off the screen and carrying out jihadi attacks? How is this happening?
Really 2 things. Authorities are not able to look at the ideological drivers. This administration, as you know, and if you've reported on, the administration has completely banned any discussion of the ideological drivers, and you can't look at the support networks. 2 perfect cases here in the United States. The Boston bombing, which you reported on, where you had the Russian FSB went to the FBI not once but twice about Tamerlane Tsarnaev and warned them.
And the FSB is the Russian intelligence service.
Russian intelligence service.
Yeah.
And so the Russians warned us twice about Tamerlane Tsarnaev.
One of the bombers.
And the FBI, by their own admission, said that they interviewed and they couldn't find, a note of radicalization. But as we know, he was going to the Islamic Society of Boston, which was founded by an Al-Qaeda fundraiser.
A Muslim Brotherhood connected mosque.
Yeah, and several terrorists, like Tariq Mahenna and Ifia Siddiqui, and now Ahmed Abu Samra, who's the ISIS propagandist, all came out of that mosque. So the FBI said, well, we can't, we couldn't find a note. Well, right there it was.
One of the most notorious known wolves is none other than Nidal Hasan, the Fort Hood shooter. Tell us about that.
Well, just like we were talking about earlier with the Boston bombing, in the case of the Fort Hood incident, the FBI was watching in real time as Major Nidal Hasan was in email communication with Anwar al-Awlaki, the al-Qaeda cleric in Yemen. The field office in San Diego, who was responsible for watching al-Awlaki, wanted to open a case on Major Nidal Hasan, and the FBI headquarters came in and shut down the investigation. And afterwards, when it came out that the FBI was aware of this known wolf, they said, well, we looked at the email correspondence and it was in accord with his research and studies at Walter Reed Hospital. Well, 4 years later, when we finally get to see the text of these emails, one of his last emails was talking about doing a suicide bombing and killing enemy soldiers.
And this email was from Nidal Hasan to Anwar al-Awlaki, an al-Qaeda cleric. That's who he's asking for advice about, hey, is it okay to kill American soldiers, basically, in suicide bombing? And this didn't raise red flags?
Well, apparently not enough.
And
then you have 13 dead Americans and dozens other injured down at Fort Hood.
Patrick, this is maddening. We have Fort Hood, a known wolf, one of the Boston bombers, a known wolf, had been interviewed by the FBI. I think one of the most notorious cases recently in terms of attacks on the West was Paris, which we just saw, the Paris attacks. The Kouachi brothers, who killed 12 people at Charlie Hebdo, including 2 police officers, they were on the radar of not only French authorities, but U.S. authorities as well, right?
One of the Kouachi brothers had already been in prison on terrorism charges for his role in funneling jihadist fighters to Iraq to kill Americans.
And released early, by the way.
Yeah, he only served about 1.5 years of his 3-year sentence. And they were on the radar again in 2011 when they were plotting a jailbreak of a notorious jihadist there in France. So, and as you said, the U.S. had both brothers on the U.S. no-fly list, as did the British.
And the U.K. did too, right?
So, there was no secret who these guys were or what they were doing.
They were a ticking time bomb, a jihadi attack waiting to happen on French soil.
And
they'd been in Yemen.
Yeah, and they had been in Yemen, and looks like they might have been tasked by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So it remains to be seen what Western authorities how they're going to respond to these series of attacks. Are they going to begin to take seriously the ideological drivers? Of course, we have all these terrorism experts, littering Washington, D.C., who, this has nothing to do with ideology. It's, because his dad didn't hug him enough. And, we've got all these experts who have no training in psychiatry.
It can't be Islam. It can't be there can't be any theological motivation whatsoever behind Islamic terrorism.
Yeah, and are we going to be able to allow law enforcement to look at these nodes of radicalization, like the Islamic Society of Boston, like Dar al-Hijra?
The emergence of ISIS, the rise of ISIS. This has been a game changer, it seems, in terms of this homegrown style jihad. You monitor this so closely. Is that what you're seeing? that the Islamic State has just galvanized a whole new generation and maybe even some unlikely folks to join the jihad?
Absolutely. We see these administration reports where, oh, you know, we killed 40 or 100 ISIS fighters. There are 1,000 ISIS fighters going over the border, the Turkish-Syrian border, to join ISIS every month, reportedly. So they are filling their ranks faster than we can kill them with what we're currently doing. And we see their propaganda, whether it's their Dabiq magazine, their English language magazine, or these propaganda videos that they put out. They're targeting Western recruits and telling them to kill Westerners, police, etc. here in the West.
Attacks, just random attacks, random beheadings. Someone's walking to work in the morning and they're snatched off the street and beheaded. That's what they're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Basically, a guerrilla war in some respects on Western soil is the ultimate goal, it seems. Patrick, we can't thank you enough, man. You're one of the best. Patrick Poole, pjmedia.com. Check out his work. Up next, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, Noah's Ark, Adam and Eve. Why does it still matter to you today? We talked to the director of a new film called Roadmap Genesis after the break. Stick around. Well, a lot of people say the Bible doesn't matter today, that it's just an archaic collection of old writings that have no bearing on our lives in the year 2015. Well, a new film called Roadmap Genesis, The Map for Mankind, says otherwise. We're joined now by its director, Nolan Lebovitz. Nolan, welcome. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
You know, full disclosure, I appear in the film Roadmap Genesis, and as you know, you came here and you interviewed me in Washington, D.C., Nolan. I made many diva demands. We had a trailer set up outside.
No, not at all.
No, it was great. It was great spending time with you. And it was great getting to see your heart a little bit, Nolan. And look, start first of all. You told me about your faith journey when we spent time together doing the interview. But tell me first of all how you came up with this great idea. And it's a great film. It looks great, Roadmap Genesis. Tell me how you came up with the idea.
Well, I was a Hollywood filmmaker, and I made real Hollywood movies. And Sony released my last one called Tortured, that starred Lawrence Fishburne in 2008. And I woke up one morning after I'd gotten married, after I had my daughter, and the world just didn't look the same way to me as it had before. And I told my wife I was going to study to become a rabbi. And that was the beginning of my journey. The journey has led me to living in Israel last year, and it led me to this movie. Wow. Because every day I would basically come home from rabbinical school and tell my wife, we just read the most amazing thing at school, or I just heard the most amazing lecture that I should totally make a movie. I should go out and start pitching it. And she would tell me, just take it easy, just go learn, and then keep these ideas to ourselves until you really hit a good one.
And by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Nolan. What was your wife's, just curious, what was your wife's initial reaction? You're this Hollywood filmmaker. Right. And you come home and say, hey, I want to be a rabbi. What was your wife's reaction to
that? Stunned, to be totally honest. But I think that, I say it in the movie, the journey would not have been possible without her.
Sure.
This is a journey that we've taken together with our kids. Yeah. And I think that it's made it all the more meaningful because of it. Right. Because, listen, I would study Hebrew biblical grammar by reading the book of Genesis to my son when he was an infant. And in full disclosure, he would fall asleep while listening to me read it in Hebrew. But it was really, it's part of the bond that I have with my children. And now when I read the Torah to them, when I read the 5 books of Moses every Saturday morning, and we read the stories and we talk about it, they're part of it. And I do it for them more than I do it for, myself.
Yeah, and you can see those family bonds that you mentioned, Nolan. I think they really shine through in the film. Talk about what Genesis means to you personally. Look, you obviously, you're going to rabbinical school, you're in Jerusalem, and there was this profound connection that you made with the book of Genesis. It was an eye-opening connection. Talk about that connection and what the book of Genesis means to you.
In the beginnings of this project, the idea was maybe I do a movie about all 5 books. Maybe I do a movie about the entire Bible. But the truth is that you can't make a movie about anything regarding the Bible unless you address the very beginning. Ken Ham says that in the movie itself. if you can't trust the beginning of the Bible, then you can't trust the rest of the Bible. And if you can't appreciate it, and my appreciation for Genesis as a young father was off the charts, because you can finally understand the stories, I believe, the way that they're supposed to be understood when you have children. When you're a son and when you have a child, like I was, you understand what it means to be a creator, what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a father, what it means to be a brother, what it means to be a neighbor. And all of that is addressed in the book of Genesis.
We got to stop right there. We're heading to a commercial, but much more coming up after the break with Nolan Lebovitz, director of a great new documentary. You see the link there on your film where you can get it, Roadmap Genesis. Much more with Nolan Lebovitz after the break. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We're talking to Nolan Lebovitz, director of a great new film called Roadmap Genesis, The Map for Humanity. Nolan, one of the things I love about the film is you interview both Christian and Jewish leaders. You mentioned before the break how, look, you can't really understand the entire Bible, believe the Bible, unless you believe and understand the beginning where it all starts, Genesis. Talk about bringing Christian and Jewish leaders together for this film.
I just finished a round of travel here in this country where I walked in and screened the movie in evangelical churches across, Orlando, Dallas, Atlanta, Phoenix, all in a week. I woke up every day in a different city. And I walked into an evangelical church in Orlando, screened the movie, and a woman stood up and said to me, "Every Sunday I pray for the Jewish people in Israel, and you're the first rabbi who's ever walked into this church."
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And that way, the movie's been a blessing. It's been a blessing because it's afforded me the opportunity to meet so many incredible people across the country. And Jews and Christians in America, a country that was founded on the Judeo-Christian ethic, we're like first cousins that don't speak enough.
Right.
That's the truth. And if this movie helps a conversation, if it helps build bridges, which is really what it's supposed to do, if it can accomplish its goal of building that bridge to bring us back to the table together, it will have been mission accomplished.
Yeah. In the lead into our interview, Nolan, I mentioned that a lot of people think, look, the book of Genesis is not relevant today. The Bible is not relevant today. Right now we have ISIS, we have Iran driving for a nuclear weapon, chaos in the Middle East, chaos in the world, civil unrest in many countries. How is Genesis relevant today to everything that's going on in the world right now?
The Torah, the Bible, it's the antidote. And I know that sounds hyperbolic. I know that sounds like an exaggeration. But the children of these insane fanatics, of these Muslim extremists, they're super proud of what they learn, and they hold these beliefs to be true. And our children go to school and are taught to question everything, including the foundation upon which this country was founded, the very Judeo-Christian ethic that holds the Bible to be integral. God is there at the beginning of the founding of this country, and yet children are discouraged to discuss God in schools today in America. And this today is the dilemma. It's our dilemma. How do we raise our children to face the world as it is? Not the way that it should be, not the way that we'd like it to be, but the way that it is. And the way that it is a harsh place where people will challenge them literally, physically, militarily. Jews and Christians are being slaughtered across the Middle East. And the Bible brings us back to a place where we understand who we are and what our mission in the world is. And I think that the book of Genesis, it really acts like the roadmap. Roadmap Genesis is not only the name, in many ways it's the way I believe that my own children should be educated.
And Nolan, you look at the stories, you talk about the hardship. It's a cruel world in many times, especially now, especially for Jews and Christians in the Middle East. You look at the stories of resilience in the book of Genesis, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Noah's Ark. It goes on and on. This is all in Genesis, stories of great overcoming great odds, of great obedience, faith, trust in God. I think it's just incredible. And you hit on all of that in the film with just an all-star cast of commentators talking about the relevance of Genesis today. Where's the best place we can see it? Tell us the best place to see Roadmap Genesis. And I encourage everyone to see this film.
If you go to our website, www.roadmapgenesis.com, you can buy a DVD. You can buy several DVDs and spread the word, which is what we're trying to get people to do. or off the website, it'll lead you to iTunes, and you can download it off iTunes if you'd like to see it that way. But go to the website, www.roadmapgenesis.com.
Excellent. Nolan, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the film. Great job, my friend. God bless you. Keep up the great work. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Eric.
And coming up next, would you like to come to Israel with the Watchman? Find out how after the break. I am thrilled to announce that along with my CBN News colleague Chris Mitchell, I'll be helping to lead the Dateline Jerusalem tour of Israel from November 3rd to the 13th, 2015. And I want you to join us. Now, Chris has been based in Jerusalem for 15 years as CBN's Middle East Bureau Chief. During that time, he has covered all of the major events in the Middle East, and he's also been my trusted guide on many trips to Israel. So it's going to be a blast to team up with Chris to lead our tour together later this year. Now, if you've never been to Israel, let me tell you, it is a life-changing experience. There is nothing like walking throughout the Holy Land in the footsteps of Jesus and the prophets and seeing the Bible come to life before your very eyes. Not only will our tour take you to all of the important biblical sites, Chris and I will also give you a unique perspective on the security challenges facing Israel and what it all means for us here in America and for the future. Bible prophecy. The tour is being run by Inspiration Cruises and Tours, the top Christian travel management company in the business. So this is all going to be first class. Count on it. You can find all the information on how to sign up for the trip by going to the webpage that you see right there on your screen. There's also a video at that link where Chris will tell you much more about this epic experience. Folks, my first trip to Israel changed my life. You may have heard me talk about it here on the show. Once you go, you are never the same. So join us from November 3rd to the 13th, 2015, 10 days in the land of Israel, the Holy Land. I would love to break bread with you later this year in Jerusalem for such a time as this.